Hey folks, last video lecture of 2020. Okay, by now, you should have your login information for the Southeast Community College, Southeast Kentucky Community College databases. Now, if you're in English 101 or English 102 this semester, you are required to use the library databases for this paper. I'm not going to be any stricter on that than I have to be, but that's a requirement for the course. So we need to make sure that you can log in. I've only heard from one of you that you had login problems, and we got that worked out. But a couple of ways you can troubleshoot on your own. One thing to make sure of is that your username as it was sent to you ends with @kctcs.edu, because I had to add that to your usernames. So it's possible that I failed to do that, and if so, that's on me. If you just have a username with that doesn't look like an email address, then add @kctcs.edu to the end of it. That may solve your problem. The other problem is with some of them has been that when the passwords were sent to me, they had spaces. Some of them had spaces in them. There are no spaces in any of the passwords. So in some cases, if you just close up that space, that solves your problem. But there has been one that we needed to reset at the college level. So if you hit that brick wall and you've tried the other troubleshooting methods and nothing works for you, let me know. They can reset your password if absolutely necessary. So you do need to, if you have not logged in and checked your username and password, you need to do that immediately, because you must use the library databases for this paper. It's not enough to use Google or Google Scholar. It's not enough just to have outside sources. You are required to use the library databases. And you will also have to do that for your annotated bibliography. That will be when we come back from Christmas break. Okay, so a couple of things I want to talk to you about the databases. It's not like searching on Google. Google has a vested interest in making their algorithm as user-friendly as possible, because they're commercial and advertisers pay them to appear on their page. So getting you to use their search engine as opposed to anybody else's, they have a vested interest in that, and they make a lot of money from it. That's not true of academic databases of any kind. So you do have to have a few skills to use them, but most of you have searched on the internet enough to know how to sort of refine a search when you're getting back way too many crazy hits. And one way you do that, whether you realize it or not, whether you've ever heard this term or not, is Boolean phrases. Okay? A Boolean phrase will be separated by one of three words: and, or not. And I'm going to tell you how to use all three of those. Let's say we'll do Christmas movies, because I'm in film studies, and I doubt any of you are going to be using Christmas movies in your research. But it's conceivable that I could be, believe it or not. Let's say I'm writing my paper on the influence of non-traditional Christmas films on, I don't know, the PG-13 rating. Okay? So I know for sure I want to start with Gremlins. Gremlins, by the way, is my personal favorite Christmas movie. And yes, it is a Christmas movie. All of the ones I'm going to mention are, and I will die on this hill. So let's say I would love to find an article that mentions all three: Gremlins, Die Hard, and Home Alone. Now, if I use the and, which is going to be the default that shows up in this little drop-down menu over here to your left, if I use the and, I am limiting myself to only sources that use all three. If it doesn't use all three, it won't show up at all. Google and its brethren will, at this point, if no hits came up, would start throwing you things that are about 2 out of the 3 or just 1. Their algorithm starts anticipating what it is you might be looking for. The library databases will not do that. If you say you want X, Y, and Z, Gremlins and Die Hard and Home Alone, and there are no sources that have all 3 in them, you will get 0 hits. Goose egg. So, let's say that happens. And you think, how can I refine that a little further? Here's one thing you can do. Go in this drop-down menu. Choose Gremlins and Die Hard or Home Alone. Then, you'll have to, it will require that it have Gremlins and one or the other of these choices. If you want any, maybe you don't get any sources then either. And you think, well, gosh, do they have anything on any of them? Then you can change both drop-down menus to or, and you will get any sources that mention any of the 3, whether they're together or not. Now, let's say you're just looking at Gremlins for your paper, but Gremlins, it turns out, is a word that's widely used in the sciences and in statistics to indicate something that's throwing a monkey wrench in there, and researchers can't figure out why. So a statistical gremlin is, we know, if I'm a statistical researcher and I'm looking at a set of numbers, I know that what I'm seeing can't possibly be accurate. Something is throwing it off, right? Gremlins is a word also used for that. So if I go in and just look at Gremlins, now I could do Gremlins and film or movie, and it would probably only bring back the film. But for the sake of argument and instructional purposes, let's assume I couldn't. That's what the not is for. I want to bring back Gremlins, but not with regard to statistics. So, that's going to eliminate any article that it would have ordinarily brought back that also includes words that start with S-T-A-T. That's what the asterisk is for. If you need to look at multiple versions of a word, multiple permutations of a word, like stat, statistic, statistical, statistics, all of those words will get swept up if you use the asterisk. Okay? That's about enough of that for one lecture. I will be here. The easiest way to learn to do this is to get in and play around with it, actually. You're going to see other boxes out here. Field is one of those. That's not a reference to like a professional field. It's a reference to a database field. So if you only wanted it to bring back articles by a particular author, for instance. We do this a lot in literature if we want to go back to, say we're looking for a full text version of Pride and Prejudice, but we don't want to loop in everything that's ever been written about Pride and Prejudice, which is what's going to happen if I put Pride and Prejudice and Austen, and I don't specify that I only want material written by Austen and not about her. You're going to get lots and lots of scholarly articles about Pride and Prejudice that mention Jane Austen. But you could choose the field author and limit it to only things she's written. You could do the same thing. Those of you in psychology that studied the Milgram experiments in 102, You see how many articles have been written about them, but if you wanted to go back to his original data, what Milgram actually wrote, you could put Milgram in the author field and it would limit it down to that. Especially if you're working on things that are very famous, sometimes you may feel the need to work in the field boxes, but usually not. There are a couple of boxes that you are going to want to make note of though. One of them is you're going to find a checkbox that says full text. In our case, because we don't have access to an academic library, if we were on a college campus and you could just walk over to the library and lay hands on a physical journal if that was the only way it was available, I would tell you not to check this box. But for you all, it's going to be very disappointing to find really useful material that's not available on the computer. So, if you hit a brick wall, it's not unreasonable to leave the full text box unchecked, because at least you're going to get some keywords and maybe some authors' names and things like that that'll help you along, that you could search on the open web for and things like that. But for the most part, I'm going to recommend that you keep the full text box checked, because those are things you can reach through the database without having to leave your home, and we're all for that right now, right? The other thing you're going to want to check, the box that you're going to want to sometimes check, is the box for scholarly, peer-reviewed journals. These are the most reliable, most credible sources that you can find. I'm not going to limit you to just scholarly and peer-reviewed journals, because their other sources are useful as well. But I will tell you that having at least a few of these that check this box, that's kind of the difference between being in the C range or the A range in terms of evidence. Now, there are other reliable sources out there. I would call Newsweek a reliable source, but it doesn't fall, it's not as reliable as something that has been read by multiple scholars and approved by PhDs in the field. Okay? So you're going to want as many of these as you can possibly find and make useful in terms of improving your grade. Okay? As long as you have used the databases and you have some sources and you've done some research, I'm not going to fail you on that front. But I will tell you straight up that it impacts how well you do on that category, on those categories, on claims and evidence in particular. Okay, I think that's about enough for now. I will be in office hours 1:30 Tuesday and Thursday this week, and 11 o'clock on Friday. Feel free to stop by if you have any problems. If you feel free to email me if you hit a brick wall of any kind. But for now, get in there and start playing around and see where you can find some things that interest you. Okay? Also, word of the week, colloquial. You can use it in any form, colloquially, colloquialism, any of those things. Please don't do so in a draft, because your drafts are primarily for the people who will be peer reviewing you. So if I glance at your drafts at all, it's just to make sure that it's adequate for somebody to peer review. So put that in a private comment on Google Classroom. You can put it in an email. You can put it in anything like that. But make sure it's somewhere that I'm going to see it pretty quickly. And your drafts are not the place to do that. But 10 points on your lowest daily grade, that's a quiz grade or response paper grade, if you use it and use it correctly. If I don't talk to you again before we come back, and I hope I do one way or the other, but if I don't talk to you again before we come back from the break, I hope you have very, very happy holidays. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is that you celebrate. Be safe, be happy, enjoy your family, and try and get a little bit of rest. Thanks, guys. You know where I am if you need me.